distance to travel this afternoon. So welcome to all of you. And Jeffrey, should I have you start, or is there somebody else who you'd like to have kick it off?
Chair, thank you. We were going to lead with Mark, if that works for everybody.
Yep.
And then I was going to follow. We have a little bit of an arrangement and a roster today. So again, thank you for everyone's time.
That's absolutely fine. In fact, Mark is first on our list. So Mark, if you're there and want to begin, please. We're all set.
Absolutely. I'm working on that. I'm trying to get my video up here.
Okay, we can hear you. Although your voice is a little bit. I'll wait till you got your video on, and then we can see how it sounds too.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'll check my audio. I'll check my audio here just to make sure I've got. Yep, you called it, Chair. You called it. There you go. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right, fantastic. So, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Reverend Mark Hughes. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and I'm really proud to be with y'all this afternoon and representing the intersection of what you'll see to be the Cannabis Equity Coalition and the Land Access Opportunity Board. So I'm sitting at that juncture. I also happen to be the co-chair of the Health Equity Advisory Commission. And I believe I kind of stumbled into being the commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars here over the last couple of years in the city of Burlington, post 782. So you'll have to also excuse my printer in the background. It has a mind of its own and it is printing something. We do not know what it is yet, but I'm excited to get to that. Maybe it might be something that might be timely for the meeting. I do apologize in advance because I'm going to have to check out after this. I was originally going to come back and talk to you with the Land Access Opportunity Board. You see Jean and Ornella there, and I've heard that, rumor has it, is that they've been in and had a pretty good conversation with you before already. So I'm really proud that they're here and representing for us the board of the Land Access Opportunity Board. So I'll just go on and get started and let you know just a little bit more about me and what I'm doing here, and also more about the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. The printer seems to have stopped printing now, so I may even have some surprises for you as well. So with the who we are and what we do through Black leadership, the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, we address root causes and the impact of systemic racism with an approach that includes solutions ranging from platforms and initiatives, outreach and education, community engagement and support, and cultural empowerment programming. The Alliance's work spans across a pretty broad range of activities to ensure the accomplishment of our mission, which is to secure sustainable power and ensure agency and provide security for American descendants of slavery while embracing their history and preserving their culture. The Vermont Racial Justice Alliance is a leading Vermont-based racial justice organization. Some of our accomplishments include the establishment of the Racial Disparities in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice System Advisory Panel, Act 54, 2017. Also, you will hear them referred to as RDAP affectionately in the halls. The Racial Equity Executive Director, I'm sure you've met Susana Davis. That office was established through Act 9, 2018 special session through our work. And also the Health Equity Advisory Commission, which is Act 33, 2021. There's also a joint legislative resolution that racism is a public health emergency in 2021, R113. Our fingerprints are on that as well. And there's a constitutional amendment that abolished slavery for the state. Yes, there was existing language in the Constitution of Vermont, and that was finalized in 2022. We've delivered hundreds of hours of training and education on systemic racism, both across the state and virtually. We manage a statewide support capability that provides response and support to impacted communities on issues related to housing, education, health services, employment, and other areas. Additional wellness work that we're doing is we have a wellness working group and various affinity groups and ongoing health and wellness outreach efforts and support. Recently, over the last several years, the last maybe 3 years or so, we established the Richard Kemp Center, which culturally brokers program expansions to marginalized communities where they've been historically underserved. And the Richard Kemp Center expands programs and services that support Black Vermonters' wellness, preserve their culture, support their youth, and advance racial equity and justice. Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, our cultural empowerment programming includes First Fridays. It supports various community-based programs and activities, observances, and commemorations. And most significant of these is our first African Landing Day to recognize and highlight the resilience and the contributions of African Americans since 1619, and to acknowledge the impact that slavery and the laws that enforced racial discrimination had and have on the United States, and to educate the public about the arrival of Africans in the United States and the contributions of African Americans to the United States. And finally, our Burlington work, that work of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance includes the development of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office here, as well as the committee and a reparations task force, in both resolutions and declarations on racism is a public health emergency. So really pleased to have the opportunity to come in and meet you today and to testify with my colleagues here at the Cannabis Equity Coalition, which leads me to the printer. The Cannabis Equity Coalition is a pretty interesting and odd group of folks. We've got, Jeffrey, I could never remember, and I'm going to have to apologize profusely to Jesse Lynn, the name of the organization, the medical organization. It wasn't on this report, so I'm going to ask you to help me with that.
Green Mountain Patients Alliance.
The Green Mountain Patients Alliance is one of ours, as well as the Vermont Growers Association. Thank you, Jeffrey. The co-founder of Trace is with us as well. Trace is a company that does seed tracing. Joshua Decatur, he's no longer with that organization. Hi, Jesse Lynn. Also, the rural Vermont. You'll hear from Graham more later. NOFA is one of our members, and then of course it's the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. Did I get everybody? Okay, so just the vision, briefly on the vision. I just want to let you know that the coalition, we share a vision for a cannabis economy in Vermont, which is racially just and economically equitable and agriculturally accessible and environmentally sound. We envision a Vermont cannabis market where Black and brown and poor folks are assured an equitable opportunity for success within every aspect of the industry. This vision for a racially just economy is grounded in an understanding of our true national history and the impacts of systemic racism, the history of criminalization and disproportionate violent enforcement of prohibition in communities of color and poor communities, and the necessity for mechanisms of repair being established by members of those communities most impacted. Now, in this decentralized economy, scale appropriate regulations facilitate and prioritize small business, outdoor cultivation, and distributed access to the wealth generated by this industry to community members throughout the state. Cannabis is grown, packaged, and distributed in ways which protect and improve soil health, water quality, and account is taken for climate change mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and human health. So during the course of the conversation that we'll have with you today, as I'm departing, you're going to hear from the rest of this group. You're probably going to hear a little bit about some of our analysis and participation in some very important details surrounding the new offset rules and what that actually looks like and how that's affecting folks and what our thoughts are on that. You probably heard some already from Pepper, the chair of CCB. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other equity-related matters as well as agricultural related matters surrounding the cannabis market. We'll put forward a pretty strong case for some of the work that's gone into analyzing for once in this market, for the first time in this market, where there's a viable strategy to create an adequate and a sustainable development fund, as well as how to go about appropriately allocating resources from the excise taxes towards marginalized communities where we've missed them historically. And there'll be some more talk about outdoor cultivation. So I'm really, again, grateful more than anything for the opportunity to come before you today and just to be in your presence. I know you guys could have been doing a bunch of other things, especially on a Friday afternoon. We appreciate so much having given the opportunity. I would be there personally, but I had an incident in the cafeteria where I thought was approached by law enforcement in the cafeteria. What that actually led me to understand is that there are some concerns surrounding the policies ranging from community engagement, fair and impartial policing, as well as use of force. But there should be some examination of those policies. I'm still in the process of communicating back and forth with the leadership, who to this point have been mostly dismissive. But I'm glad that we do have this as an opportunity as an option. The remote. I won't be in the State House until I feel safe again. It's unfortunate, but this is how I've been relegated to having to testify to you today. And the main reason it's unfortunate is because, number one, I think that there are other folks who could be in danger. And number two, this is the definition of access to justice. So I appreciate, again, your time. And I look forward to the opportunity to come back and testify before you again. Subject to your questions, that's all I have. And I will just, instead of bringing everybody else up and then taking questions later, I'll take questions now because of the specificity of my testimony. The last thing that I also mentioned, as well as the fact that I'm going to have to get off here pretty quickly. So, Mr. Chair, if you would please, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any or all.
All right, thank you, Reverend Hughes, Mark, and I'm sorry too that you're not able to be with us today. And I will say that I hope that when you feel the situation is resolved to your satisfaction, that you can come in and visit with us in person. We would like that. Are there questions from the committee? Reverend Hughes' testimony. Representative Lipsky.
Reverend Hughes, I just 2 years ago, I spent about 5 weeks reading cover to cover the 1619 project.
Wow.
And I came away feeling that should be required reading for any American citizen. So thank you for bringing that back to my conscience. I could give you I'm not a fast reader, but it was very powerful. And just want to say I'm disappointed that you feel not safe, and that's disturbing. Okay, but I consider this body and this building to be very open to Racial Justice Alliance, and many of the folks on the screen here we've seen and welcome. So just look forward to more testimony, I guess. The comment question.
Thank you, Representative Lipsky, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I have to speak the truth. Is I have not read 1619 Project from cover to cover, so I'm definitely.
I'm a slow reader, and but every section and presenter, whether it was poetry, whether it was historical records and analysis, was powerful, and I consider it required reading for thoughtful citizens. And I have a high school diploma, and that's as far as what's hanging on my walls.
I did get my GED.
Okay. Well,
So
you're
I
a
do-
veteran. You're in a high echelon for me.
If I could please, just to respond to that, I would just say I really thoroughly appreciate your comments and also your support. And I'm a fan of Lamoille County. I know you're Lamoille 1, and so I just want to just give your folks a shout out there. You know, I know folks over there, like the Rabbi David, and I think it's
Father Rick and
yeah.
and
Yeah, the whole you're up near Stowe, I think,
they're
but
my buddies.
yeah, I really love your community, and if I had someplace else to live in the state, I'd get out of Burlington and come out there. So that's all I'll say about that. But I do appreciate you, and I appreciate the entire committee. I thank you immensely just for the time that you guys have afforded us today. I don't take it lightly when I get into committee and have the opportunity to express myself in the fight for justice, and I appreciate all of y'all as champions.
All right. Well, Mark, I know you have to jump off at some point, but if you're able to stay on as long as you're able to, and maybe we should turn it over to Jeffrey.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. I can't quite tell if the vice chair is there, but just for the record, my name is Jeffrey Pizzatello. I am the executive director and co-founder of Vermont Growers Association. We are a founding member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition that Mark did an excellent job of introducing us all. I'm going to spend just about 5 minutes total, and in my testimony right now with you, I'm going to share a little bit more about our organization, introduce ourselves at Vermont Growers Association. I will run through our 7 priorities. Sidonia, I don't know if you pass that around or if you're able to bring that up on the screen. The document that we had submitted, if able, that would be appreciated. Sorry for the last minute request.
That would be a U.
Okay.
If you want to join you're going to share your screen through the Zoom room.
Oh, I can. Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Why don't I give that a try right now?
That seems to be working. Yep, good.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you. Excellent. And after we run through our priorities briefly, I want to provide this committee with our perspective on where the market's at right now. I think other than the Cannabis Control Board, whom you heard earlier today, our organization interfaces with likely more licensees than really anyone in the state on a regular basis. So we want to impart some of those perspectives on you all. And before I do, I would just like to say that, we as a coalition, and notably myself at Vermont Growers Association, we are standing in solidarity with the Reverend and his sentiments. Some of us were present when that incident occurred in the State House. And just very briefly, some thoughts on that. Specific to the cannabis market, this state and the federal government still does, and other states still do, consider cannabis producers, manufacturers, sellers, criminals. This is very much a transitional moment, and I think it is incumbent on the State House, if we are standing up, and we in fact are a regulated marketplace, that we do what we can to make those communities who are often marginalized communities, either social demographically or people of color, that it is vital that we make that environment safe, feel safe for those individuals. So I just want to impart our perspective on that situation and note that we wish we could be with you in person, but we are in fact abstaining from that as of the moment to stand in solidarity with Mark. So thank you for listening on that statement. Before I introduce ourselves, I just want to take a moment. We do have a visitor with us, Carlos Rodriguez. He is our legislative intern here at Vermont Growers Association this semester. We are very excited to be working with the Vermont State University. Y'all did a really good job in supporting that educational institution. They are now working with this cannabis sector. And in part of that work, we want to bring really all individuals from all walks of life into this conversation. The intersectionality of cannabis is profound. And we have Carlos Rodriguez, a senior at Vermont State University, excellent, outstanding baseball player, who just wants to take a minute to introduce himself to the committee. And I thank you all for entertaining him for a minute. Carlos, you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. First off, I would like to thank the chair, vice chair, and every committee member for allowing the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition this opportunity to speak today. My name is Carlos Rodriguez. I'm from La Mirada, California. I am currently a senior at VTSU Linden, and I'm also on the baseball team, as Jeff had said. This is my second semester working as a legislative intern for the Vermont Growers Association. I would just like to finish by saying thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak, and I wish you all a great legislative session.
Hey, thank you. Nice to meet you, Carlos. And we hope that at some point you'll have an opportunity to visit in person as well. And please stop by if you do.
Thank you, Chair, and committee. And I want to follow up on Carlos's sentiments and say, though we are in February, congratulations, everybody, on your committee appointments, chair, vice chair, whom were here last year, last biennium, and also committee members as well. Lots of new faces in the State House. And we wish you all a formative session this year as well. So just a couple minutes about Vermont Growers Association. So we formed in March of 2019, though we've got growers in our name. We are very proud that we have just over 80 members now of our trade association that represents the entire supply chain, from retailers to product manufacturers to cultivators of different tiers, indoor, outdoor. We think that in this tiny state, it's pertinent that that we really lean into our shared interests to arrive at viability in this unfolding regulated space. I just want to say that some of the things that we've done here as an organization over the years, just to give you guys familiarity with our scope of work. We do educational programming, whether it's engaging regulatory or legislative policymaking. So holding events with the industry to bring awareness to and discuss issues of the rules. For instance, with the CCB, currently undergoing a rules amendment process for its second time since it formed. Very important for the industry. We also do workshops in terms of programming. We've held some educational workshops with our coalition members, Rural Vermont, and other ancillary businesses, for instance, labs. So licensees have a really firm understanding of the testing criteria in this regulated space. In addition to advocacy and organizing. And we also last year stood up what we're calling the Vermont Cannabis Industry Emergency Fund. Those of you who are familiar, it's not so different than NOFA, Vermont's Farmers Fund, Emergency Fund, such that what makes it unique here for us in the cannabis sector, and what the board had alluded to, if you're not familiar, the unique relationship with the federal government really excludes a lot of our licensees from obtaining emergency funds and that relief during times of need, whether it be flooding from a storm or hurricanes or their barn burning down. So what we did as a nonprofit organization is we stepped in as best as we could and stood up a grant program. We're happy to report that in 2024 we had 11 different grantees and distributed over $30,000 to those small local farms, product manufacturers, and some retailers as well that were impacted from the past storms and whatnot, the effects of human-caused climate change. So a little bit about our scope of work and what we do. From there, I think I'd like to move into just a rundown of our 7 priorities as a coalition. Let's see here. Can you all still see my screen?
We can see it, yes.
Terrific, excellent. Okay, I'm just going to run through them. We've got quite a roster, as you all know, so I'm going to allow my colleagues to unpack more of these in depth. But just starting at the top, equity.
Jeff, can I interrupt?
Yeah, please do.
I'm sorry, this is Graham Unix from FNOC Policy Director of Vermont. And Jeff, the screen you're sharing doesn't actually have the policy goals on them. It has the Squarespace page for Vermont growers on it.
Oh.
There we go.
Thank you, Graham. Can you guys see the 2025 priorities now?
We can.
They're
Okay.
a little small, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
A little bit better? Okay, terrific. All right, so just to step through these, and thank you for that, Graham. So priority 1, equity funding. This really, in a nutshell, is about identifying where we come from and what we're really trying to do here. Keep in mind that back in 2020, the Enabling Statute, Act 164, does charge the CCB with forming a regulated market by transitioning Vermont's legacy farms and businesses and doing so in an equitable manner. So we lean into this as a top priority. Most states have some form of appropriations for reinvestment back into the industry and also community reinvestment. Really robust discussion in the agency, the CCB, in between sessions last summer and fall with regards to recommendations. That came out of the 15A legislative report. We've got some named parties here in that working group, notably the LAOB. And so we're requesting for some of the funds from the cannabis excise tax to be redirected to the Cannabis Business Development Fund with some reforms to that fund, and then also 25% to the LAOB, the Land Access and Oversight Board. You'll hear more about that in further testimony after me. Moving on, point 2, direct markets, value added for small tiers of cultivators and manufacturers. It's important that we include manufacturers in this conversation. Our small producers in this state do not have access to basically the general public. That makes it challenging, if not possible, to form relationships with their customer base. They're really beholden to retailers and intermediaries when it comes to price points. So price and volatility, something I'll speak to in a minute. This is what we really much consider a missing component of market structure and something that we hope lawmakers this year consider for really addressing it as a solution. We think that this year is make or break for direct sales. The third point is agricultural use. As the chair of the Cannabis Control Board mentioned in his testimony earlier today, in 2022, the legislature passed Act 158. Act 158 brought Vermont into really a unique space such that there's only 3 states in this country that have some sort of recognition that cannabis is an agricultural product. Vermont is one of them. We don't consider cannabis technically agriculture, but I think what Ledge Counsel O'Grady likes to frame it as is we've provided some of our outdoor cultivators with the benefits, the regulatory benefits of farming. So that is unique. That is a moment of progress. That effort has been under threat through last year's legislation, Act 166, through cultivation districts and setbacks, really causing harm to this regulated space. I'll allow my colleague Graham to unpack that more. The fourth priority is restorative justice, ensuring that all Vermonters, no matter how much perhaps they were charged with selling pot or producing pot, that they're included in their felony charges being absolved from them. We think that is past due. That is still on the table and work that needs to get done. After point 4, we've got public consumption. Vermont is in fact one of the least friendly states to consume. So we're thinking about not just tourists coming to our state, but really the most vulnerable in Vermont. So non-homeowners, everyone should deserve a safe and legal place to consume with dignity, not just homeowners or those with privilege. Look forward to having that conversation as well. To round this out, 2 more points. Homegrown allowances. Home grow is vital to the vibrancy of a regulated space. Think about beer and winemaking. Vermont very much is a cottage industry state, as you all know intimately well. We don't think that cannabis should be excluded from that. Ensuring appropriate and reasonable protections for home grow allowances is pivotal. We're asking for a slight increase for adults in the state to match what you all increased for our medical patients a couple of years ago, which is 6 mature plants, 12 immature plants. And then finally, and perhaps equally important as point 1 in terms of equity and reinvestment back into ourselves, into the community, and that is our medical cannabis program. We've got Jessie Lynn Dolan from the Green Mountain Patients Alliance who will unpack more of that for you. But one of the working groups that the CCB also engaged in addition to the equity and outdoor setting working groups, is a medical cannabis program working group. And that recommendation is to position the eligibility and symptoms management of that program under the CCB. And there's other reforms there as well that Jessie Lynn will unpack with you all. So those are our list of priorities, just briefly. I'm going to bring this to a close just by taking a minute to share with you all that, the board was in here earlier. We heard what they said. We really appreciate a lot of the sentiments and members of committee. We thought you guys asked some really great questions. Maybe to pick up on some of those themes very briefly. From our vantage point here at Vermont Growers Association, we are nearly 3 years into this regulated marketplace, and there's a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work left, and we very much see the market as incomplete from a market crafting and equitability perspective. And what I mean by that is we see numbers such as 17 million in excise tax revenue for the state. Over 1,000 jobs were created through this regulated market. About 600 or so active licensees. The market has performance numbers, but beneath that surface really is, and there's really no way to describe it, committee, is a collapse. There's a lot of pain in the market right now amongst licensees, notably our small producers. It is a very challenging time for them to simply survive. Many of them are looking at 2 to 3 jobs to support their families, and we don't think that should be the case. And keep in mind that these are licensees who are actively in the market. We have not completed the job of transitioning our legacy marketplace. So we still have farmers and product makers who wish to join the market and have obstacles in front of them, such as access to land and capital. And we look forward to having those conversations. And I would also have you keep in mind that it is incumbent on us not to just to transition the legacy marketplace here in Vermont, but also the customers from that legacy marketplace as well. Many customers in Vermont, Vermonters themselves, for decades have been buying products directly from small producers, whether it's dairy or their vegetables. Cannabis is no different, and we have to be real about this. those customers will not transition and start engaging the regulatory market until they can buy directly from their farmers and their product manufacturers as they have been doing this entire time. So a lot to unpack. I'm going to stop there. I welcome any questions, and I'm going to hang around and pass it off to you, Graham.
Great, thank you, Jeffrey. I'm not seeing any hands here, so Graham, if you want to jump right in and pick it up there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. Can I just get a clarifying question? When do you all have us scheduled till?
We until people start to feel like they need to go home, I think.
Okay, I just wanted to check myself.
And that, I mean, to be fair, that could happen at any moment. I haven't pulled the committee.
Okay, let's say 20 something minutes here. Great. Well, my name's Graham Eubanks-Strufenach. I'm the policy director at Rural Vermont. I've been before the committee to introduce myself along with Caroline Gordon, our legislative director. So I won't say anything more about us. I don't think I need to. I'm going to use my time here to speak a little to the agricultural aspects of this coalition's work. Specifically, this aspect of agricultural status for outdoor cultivation over time and Vermont's history of work doing so as well. And I'd also appreciate the opportunity, as Julie mentioned from the CCB, to return to the committee in the future to discuss both our proposals, but also the outdoor siting and advertising report and the social equity program report, as I think those will, to some extent at least, fall within your domain. I'll also say, like, I was one of the people present for the incident that Mark spoke to, and we have chosen to be here remotely today in relationship to that. And some of the things we're talking about as an organization is that, we host these small farm advocacy days at the State House, which some of you are familiar with. We've been doing it for more than 10 years. And we invite community members into the State House. We work to familiarize them with the policy process, to introduce them to their representatives, to work to get them time before committee. And those people really come from many identities, histories, and forms of status of one kind or of another that may affect both how they see police and how police see them. And this incident brings up a number of questions for us about State House policies and procedures in related to how police interact with civilians. And like Mark said, we're trying to have those conversations with leadership, and hopefully see you all soon. And hope the environment changes a little. But we are a founding member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. For rural Vermont, we began our work on hemp in 2008 at the state level. It was interesting to hear Representative Nelson speak in the CCB session to your experience growing hemp as well. I'm not sure at what point you did that. Hemp's now regulated as agriculture at the USDA level. It's not just a state program anymore, as most folks in the committee probably know at this point. It's been rural Vermont's position since pre-adult use regulation that if it's going to be regulated, among other things, it really needs to be accessible for farmers and community members to access, to participate and succeed in its economy. And we know that nationwide, both adult use production and traditional farming are economically marginalized. And this is an opportunity for Vermont farmers, aspiring farmers, and its legacy cannabis producers. And when we say legacy, the other word, what we often hear is illicit. But that's what we're saying when we're talking about legacy. It's just a term that doesn't sort of perpetuate that criminalization. As you know and have heard, federal law says we can't regulate adult use cannabis as ag, given its federal status. But what I think is important to give you here is some history of how Vermont has dealt with that. That was sort of a little bit left out of the CCB's presentation. So Vermont has prepared for this transition to ag at the federal level by putting in statute language that says it would begin to be regulated by the AFM and as ag in Vermont as that transition happens federally. Vermont law, and even despite this, that work is in statute and that we've been working this over time, we know that farmers can't grow adult use cannabis on land in the Vermont Land Trust or land under contract with NRCS or any land that has the access of which is funded by federal programs, as Kyle Harris and James Pepper testified to earlier. And that land is in general very hard to afford, especially if it doesn't have ag easements, other opportunities for lessening that price. We also know that there are other really high barriers to access, high basic costs of administration, from banking to insurance to regulatory compliance. We estimated even just roughly that like $15,000 to $20,000 just for that compliance work for a tier 1 outdoor license, which is the most accessible license. The inability to access federal grants and loans or write off expenses, the requirement to lose a significant portion of the value of your product you produce or manufacture as you have no direct market access. So you might hear that there's a saturated market in Vermont, but in truth, without direct markets for small producers and manufacturers, we have a fundamental market inequity, which is creating a bottleneck at a limited number of retail operations and a limited number of geographic locations. So Commissioner Harris said earlier that, and I want to emphasize this, I was really happy to hear how they were speaking about this, not because I'm happy about the state of the market, but just to hear the transparency which they brought to this, that, cannabis cultivators are alone. And he meant in relationship to equitable access to resources. He says we made it easier to enter the market, but how do we get them to stay? They took a leap of faith with us. And James said, these people are struggling. And then Kyle said as well, to remind you that strong tax revenue isn't correlated with market health or the viability of those small businesses. That was really great contextual information they provided, and I just want to reiterate that, in addition to all those things I just said. And in terms of a little about this question of how big could a growing operation be to be profitable in general, I want you all to know, and I'm sure Jeffrey and VGA and growers would bring in could testify better to this, that the small scale of production is absolutely possible to be profitable at. In fact, Vermonters have been doing this for decades and been profitable at different, scales that worked for them in terms of the scale profitability for their life and livelihood. It's the regulatory regime federally and locally, which is really making it very challenging to be profitable. And I was actually on a call with the cultivator prior to this just today, and he said he thinks that we will see a dramatic drop in small license holders. And the only thing he thought that can move the needle would be direct sales. So I want to clarify as well when we're talking about ag that we're not saying that cannabis and tomatoes are the same thing or should be regulated exactly the same. We're saying that their cultivation, how the land is grown, and the farmers, the people themselves are treated is appropriate to regulate in a very similar way. And where we see some acceptable, maybe critical differences, include many of the security and site requirements, which are already required for cultivators. They're tied to their tiers, and their intensity is based on the tier, and the CCB makes those rules. And as people have said, in terms of this agricultural access, some of the actual mandates that you all set for yourselves, as in the legislature, I don't mean to speak to you as individuals, but in that role, accessible for small farmers, bringing the legacy and illicit market into regulated market. And in terms of agricultural access, direct markets, we're really getting to some of these issues in particular. So we have worked with members of the House Ag Committee and members of the Senate Ag Committee to advance our own language as Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. In past years, we worked with Senate Ag and Senator Starr 2 years ago to enumerate a number of aspects of agricultural status, including Act 158. That's called an act relating to regulating small-scale cannabis cultivation as farming. And that act allowed the smallest tier of outdoor cultivation license, that's the 1,000 square foot or 125 plants, to be regulated in the same manner as farming and not as development on the tract of land where cannabis cultivation occurs. So that includes access to current use status if it was already enrolled, exemptions from municipal bylaw, and Act 250 and similar development laws, and exemption from the retail sales tax. Now in H270 in 2023, we went beyond that and extended the benefits that have been available to small cultivators to all outdoor cultivators, allowing such cultivators to enroll in the use value appraisal program current use, regardless of whether the land was previously enrolled, and entitling such cultivators to a rebuttable presumption, which is the right to farm laws, that cultivation does not constitute a nuisance under law in the same manner as agricultural activities. So we were going in this really phenomenal trajectory in a lot of ways. I was trying to, again, reduce those barriers and make the link between, even though we can't regulate this as ag because of federal law, we can give it status of ag to make it more accessible for these community members and more broadly. Now, as Jeffrey said last year, what began as a separate bill aimed at eliminating all outdoor cultivation in areas of a particular density or in public water sewage ultimately shifted into provisions in what was H6112, which created an allowance for preferred cultivation districts and municipalities in minimum and maximum setbacks. You all heard about that from Julie, James, and Kyle a little bit. This bill and the entirety of the debate has centered on one particular operator in conflict in Essex Junction. In this situation, there was no mediation attempted. Instead, there have been lawsuits and legislation. And this legislation, according to the CCB's estimates and our own, will ultimately negatively impact many more licensed cultivators than this one particular person, regardless of whether their neighbors or municipalities have any concerns. And those livelihoods that they've invested or they'd like to invest will not, and actually the actual setbacks in those, they will not actually address the issue such as smell that legislation claims to address. So it's not to say that there aren't people who feel adversely affected by their proximity to a cannabis cultivator or another type of farm or part of a neighbor's property or business or activities. A really good example I've heard is, I have some neighbors whose trees let out a certain type of pollen every year, and I can't go outside for a number of weeks without taking my allergy medications. This type of adverse effect happens with many land uses, and this particular conflict remains the only one which is brought to the fore related to cannabis and the creation of this law. And I'm not going to get really into this outdoor setting report. I'll wait till I come back. But just something to keep in mind is that the data from municipalities in response to the CCB survey reflects this lack of conflict more broadly. For example, nearly 90% of municipalities indicated they have no issue with outdoor cultivators, and only 2% indicated significant issues. And conversely, we have seen over the years ample evidence from municipalities discriminating against cannabis cult producers, actively working against the law to target them. And we've had to be in touch with the CCB and the legislature and others about that, because it sort of comes down to them having the resources to file a lawsuit against the town or not. So again, we're sort of left with this question of what's the threshold of harm or nuisance, and what pervasiveness must it have to demand a dramatically shifted regulatory response like happened last year? And we don't see that demonstrated in this report. I even made a visit to the site in the middle of the cannabis harvest season this year because it was such a big deal in the legislature last year. And I think that the site has been misrepresented. And I'd encourage people to contact that particular individual or get in touch with me if you want to have your contact shared with him to go visit yourself if you want to see if he's willing to host any of you. More broadly, the Outdoor Setting Working Group, we really hope you will take time to have Julie and others back at the ag committees to look at this, because I think it's in your jurisdiction to at least some extent. To keep it simple, it's our position that this law is inappropriate. It will objectively cause greater harm than the situation is trying to resolve, and it's best for Vermont to return to regulating outdoor cultivation in the same manner as agriculture as relates to municipal oversight. We have also seen in direct conversations with many that politics, as opposed to evidence, seems to be driving this issue. And we really ask that lawmakers look beyond politics to the real situation on the ground as much as possible. I want to mention our advocacy for direct markets for producers. I briefly did, but this is a place where you all have a lot of experience, and certainly it's in your jurisdiction. We need your help. These people and businesses cannot afford to be allowed to sell only wholesale. Me as a small beef farmer, I would not be in existence if I had to sell my product wholesale. Small farmers rely at least partially on direct sales. And beyond this, we believe it is the right of the very people who grow and make these products to directly access their customers, and for those customers to access them and to recoup the majority of the value of their time and work versus automatically losing it to someone who had nothing to do with that product. These people don't want to be retailers selling other people's products. They want to sell their own products to people directly, and that's very different from having a retail license and scale, scope, risk, cost, and many other factors. We think it's entirely reasonable to articulate a scale-appropriate regulation for point of sales for producers and to build that out collaboratively with the CCB and legislature. We've developed some language from past bills. We continue to draft stuff with cultivators. And if we want to see more of the underground market come above board, we need to see cultivators who did come up, not being left alone, as Kyle said. They need to see assistance through very burdensome administrative requirements. They need capital to invest. They need a market which isn't just easy to enter, which I don't think it's as easy as it sounds to enter, but which they can survive and make a livelihood as they have been. And direct markets are an absolute necessity to reach more of these people and make it possible for these businesses to succeed. As I turn over to my colleagues, I just want to affirm that our coalition has supported a portion of the excise tax going to community reinvestment since prior to market formation, and this is common in most other markets. We're very excited to see the Land Access and Opportunity Board step in as an organization to receive this funding and to advocate for it, and to assist in their work in equitable land and housing access, ag land, and otherwise. And we think this is very relevant to this committee, as well as other important needs they're working to meet. And additionally, the expansion of the Cannabis Business Development Fund to include a farm viability type program. I think many of you are aware of the Intervale Farm Viability Program, and that's what I want you to think about when you think about what we're talking about here. For small producers and social equity licensees, and that's something we've been very supportive of. We feel it's another aspect of cannabis legislation that's in the domain of this committee. And otherwise, I'm happy to take questions, but would also like to hand it off. I think Jesse Lynn's next, and then we go to Jean and Ornella.
All right.
I do have.
Representative Burr.
Hi, Graham. Are you looking to have kind of an equal status to the way that beer or cider is regulated in terms of smaller scale sales? Are you familiar with those? I'm not too familiar with those regulations myself, but is that a kind of a? Obviously, I think if we, obviously, it would want to be similar to beer and cider sales in that it's a substance that is intoxicating. You can't, I would assume you're not advocating for selling it like a bunch of carrots to your neighbor. Just for that reason, we would probably have to change the laws on selling beer and alcohol and things of that sort as well, if we were to make that happen. But is that what you're looking for, just for clarity?
It's a great question, and it might be worth having us back to talk more extensively about direct sales. But I will say Jeffrey has more knowledge, I think, of the beer and wine corollary. I have more understanding of, direct sales on farms for other products. And personally, I think the people growing hops and stuff for beer and wine, those are agricultural products. The people growing cannabis itself, it's still not considered agricultural products. So what we've been thinking of more is, of course, we need to have training for carding, for ID, even a system for bringing in customers into a database and making it more simple, but essentially having a secure point of sales, either remote from the farm or this can be on the farm, where you can bring in people for, like I just said, secure point of sales at your site. That's as clean as I can make it right now without getting into the details about like how we might forecast taking product from the inventory here and how we keep it secure and how we make sure the tax revenue is accounted for and how we make sure this is safe and secure. But that's the idea, is to start with some base that we feel like everything's comfortable piloting, that's on farm or off farm, some form of direct sales of that nature. I can't speak again to the cideries or the wineries or the beer and alcohol sales quite as much. But Jeffrey has brought that into discussion more than myself. That's more of his expertise.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, did you want to respond? And I do have an eye on the clock. I will be honest with you. And I want to make sure that everybody feels like they have a chance to say their piece. But if you wanted to answer quickly.
I think that I'd like to defer my time this time now to other witnesses here and just reinforce maybe what my colleague Graham said. Look forward to perhaps having this conversation in the coming weeks. It is a very important one to have this year. And thank you for raising that question. But I'll defer right now.
Okay, great. And as always, I think that individual committee members were free to reach out to have conversations offline too. All right, Jesse Lynn, I think you're up next with the Patients Alliance.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I understand exactly where you guys are at. I'm just coming off 4 13-hour shifts in a row. So thank you guys for hanging in there with us at the end of your long week as well. My name is Jessie Lynn Dolan. I'm a registered nurse. I'm a mother. I'm a cannabis patient and cannabis caregiver for my son. I was also a Tier 2 licensed outdoor cannabis farmer, but gave my license up to protect my nurse license when the Office of Professional Regulation decided to investigate me for cannabis education. The case has closed. I won, proving that nurses can and should be educating in cannabis, but I'm no longer a cannabis cultivator due to protecting my license. I'm the former president of the American Nurses Association here in Vermont, just stepping down after 4 long years through COVID. I'm currently on the Vermont Nurse Forensic Board. I'm the former director of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, as well as having founded the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association in 2017 to help educate and provide harm reduction for patients, consumers, and healthcare providers. I completed the University of Vermont's Cannabis Science and Medical Professional curriculum many years ago, and I'm grateful to have been able to testify and advocate for cannabis and hemp here in Montpelier for about a decade now. I'm grateful to be on Zoom today, recognizing and deeply saddened that not all of my colleagues feel safe enough to be in person, which really shows how important and needed the work of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition truly is. I'm co-founder of the Green Mountain Patients Alliance and a proud part of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition there. As a nurse, my work experience spans a multitude of Vermonters, starting with labor and delivery and newborn care, where I co-founded UVM's volunteer labor doula program. For many years, I worked with high-risk adolescents with behavioral challenges and developmental differences, specializing in co-occurring substance use and mental health comorbidities in adolescents, adults, and pregnancy, including detoxification and stabilization of newborns. I worked at UVM's College of Medicine Behavioral Sciences Department for opioid and cannabis research, in the medicated assisted treatment program within the Vermont Blueprint model of care, as well as chronic pain and case management experience. I currently work as a home health community wellness nurse with the aging, high-risk, low-income population, the same population ranking #1 in cannabis purchasing since legalization. I chose to work there after they reached out to me for cannabis education. I'm a cannabis patient myself for chronic pain and PTSD. Becoming a cannabis patient as a nurse was not an easy choice. I have a team of over 12 healthcare professionals that work with me to keep me functioning, able to be a parent, and work as a nurse. All these providers have worked with me to try countless pharmaceuticals and approaches, all who agree cannabis is the best option at this time. I'm a childhood survivor of a motor vehicle accident perpetrated by a drunk driver, having had over 40 surgeries to date, 4 different types of bone to keep my face together, equating to chronic pain, at times debilitating. I'm also a survivor of sexual and domestic violence, as well as having a genetic disorder that causes chronic pain. Cannabis for me replaces 6, if not 10 pharmaceutical prescriptions without the comparable side effects or higher likeliness of addiction. I am 27 years sober as of last month. I only share my story when I feel it is helpful for listeners who understand medicinal cannabis and look within to their own stigmas and biases, which I have had and needed help and support working through regarding my own understanding and feelings of cannabis, whether medical or recreational. Everything I stand for and have worked towards is to create a better medical program for our most vulnerable Vermonters. The Green Mountain Patients Alliance advocates for equitable access to affordable, high-quality cannabis for medicinal use in Vermont. Access is vital to an equitable medicinal cannabis market. We look to decentralize the current market. Affordable cannabis is essential to a healthy community and a just medical cannabis market. Laws and regulation must reflect the unique interest of patients and caregivers and the importance of affordable, clean, safe medicine. Vermont's medical cannabis market has reflected the interest of the 3 out-of-state and out-of-country medical dispensaries holding companies' shareholders for far too long and without commitment to our Vermonters. This makes it all the more crucial for Vermont to pursue a patient and caregiver-centered policy agenda and program to help focus the market onto the individuals it is intended to help. With the start of the adult use market, the medical dispensary closure was apparent and imminent. We are saddened that it has taken almost 2.5 years into the adult use market for the medical program to be prioritized as compared to the adult use market, with financial and tax incentives and gains for the state. Knowing this expected closure would be detrimental to patients. We're disappointed at the lack of education and hope to help change this for both the adult use consumers' safety and for our most deserving and vulnerable patients. I feel strongly we need separate meetings and bills carved out just for medical, rather than, I appreciate it, but squeezing in medical into adult meetings and bills, as well as needing medical professionals weighing in, if not part of the medical program. I was one of several cannabis educators for bud tenders for the CCB from the beginning of the program until the end of 2024, having trained almost 300 bud tenders myself. I have concerns at the lack of knowledge amongst our adult use retailer staff, as well as the lack of prioritization of education since the program's inception. Since inception until April of 2024, when my nursing license went under investigation, I offered a free to consumers cannabis nurse hotline, offering one-on-one education and support, unlike any other level of support and education available, and a shining example of what patients deserve. The hotline closed due to a more recent CCB policy not allowing any medical professionals to work in or with adult use retailers. We hope to see this addressed, as July medical endorsements will come quickly when adult use retailers will be allowed to serve medical patients. Yet I think we can all agree that we definitely need more knowledge and support to be able to do so well, more importantly, safely. Green Mountain Patient Alliance supports the CCB's medical report recommendation to move the administration of eligible conditions and oversight onto them. We also hope to see the development of a price management system that maintains all medical cannabis transactions to a standard wholesale pricing structure based upon a percentage of the value of products in the adult use market. We have many other recommendations and policy points would love to discuss when the time is available, or if this isn't the right committee. I appreciate you guys taking this up. Again, requesting more time for medical specifically, including reestablishing a medical cannabis oversight advisory panel. We had this prior to the adult use program, which helped administer and manage the symptoms and conditions list for program eligibility, as well as all the other aspects. We have a medical cannabis program that has no medical professionals involved and has no way of allowing patients and caregivers to have voices or be part of it. With the largest medical dispensary now closed, we continue to advocate for allowing caregivers to care for 3 patients and patients to help 3 caregivers. These are just a few of the recommendations we hope to go over this session. We're excited to work together and really hope to have some time to discuss medical, which is far overdue for a makeover. We support the policy positions and recommendations that everyone addressed here as VCEC. We see the importance and the need to expand our ag-related policies specific for outdoor cultivators, and we ask to remove those cultivation districts and setbacks in Act 166. I can't say enough about the importance of direct market access to the patient and caregiver community. This is the absolute best way for patients and caregivers to not only support local, but actually afford cannabis instead of much cheaper other options like opioids. Financially, we ask you to help support directing $1 million to the cannabis excise tax revenue to the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and for the financial and technical assistance for the industry, as well as the 25% cannabis excise tax to the Land Access Opportunity Board, who you'll hear from next. Just like the medical program is overdue for a makeover, it's far overdue for Vermont to complete expungement of any and all cannabis-related charges and not recriminalize. We understand that patients, as well as medicinal consumers who for one understandable reason or another choose not to be a patient on the medical registry, have access to safe public consumption anywhere tobacco is lit. Our most vulnerable patients need to legally consume their legally allowed medicine without risk of legal repercussions, which could cause major safety concerns. When time allows, I'd love to discuss more in depth the plant counts for cultivation to help you understand why higher plant counts, are desperately needed for medicinal cannabis consumers, as well as recreational or adult use consumers who may be using medicinally, just don't want that cannabis card. I can break down the actual numbers and product yields for you all so you see what plant count is helpful and why. We have so much to discuss medically, but today I am here in solitude with the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition and fully support their agricultural requests, asking you to do the same. I truly appreciate your time. Welcome questions or connect another time. The American Nurses Association of Vermont will have about 100 nurses there Tuesday morning next week, and we'll be offering you guys breakfast and tea. If you'd like to come and say hello, that would be fabulous. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for the testimony and thank you for that invitation. Let's see. Jean, you were here, but last week, recently, I'm not sure when it was, but Ornella was not. So
Yeah.
hello.
Hi. For the record, my name is Ornella Mata Figueroa, and I'm co-director with Jean of the Land Access and Opportunity Board. I know we were with you last week, so we will not go into detail about the LAOB and what our work is. I wanted to introduce myself so you'll hear my voice in the conversation, and to remind you all what the LAOB was founded for, which was to promote improvements in access to woodlands, farmlands, and land and home ownership for Vermonters who are historically marginalized. And communities in Vermont and Vermonters who continue to face barriers to land and home ownership. And who are these marginalized folks in our community? Are low-income Vermonters, all poor Vermonters, Vermonters with developmental disabilities, LGBTQIA Vermonters, and Vermonters who are people of color.
Thanks, Ornella. We're really aware at what a long week and what a long day it is, and that we're coming to the end of Friday. So we'll be very brief and would really love to connect with anyone offline or even come back. But I'm just quickly going to share. I did not get to hear the CCB's. We didn't get to hear the CCB's testimony, but just to bring to you all that the one of the reports they submitted to this body this year includes a recommendation about community reinvestment. So I'm just going to show you these slides so that if you do go back and read that report, you can kind of flag that this is what we're talking about here. So the recommendation from that study group was to dedicate a portion of the cannabis excise tax to community reinvestment, recognizing that the war on drugs and discriminatory policing have led to some of our communities being policed more aggressively, and that has really withdrawn wealth from those communities. So particularly poor people, and Black and brown people are policed more harshly, and certainly were when cannabis was illegal. This has set our communities up to be in a position where, for many of our community members, like, it is not even an option to think about participating in the cannabis marketplace because of the requirement for private capital. So the recommendation here is that 25% of the excise tax is designated to the Land Access and Opportunity Board to support our purpose and powers to directly invest into Vermont communities. And what I'll just highlight for you here is the way we think about that appropriation, which would be about $5.6 million this year, is really to put money directly into the hands of Vermonters to empower them to buy homes, to build homes, and to access land and build land enterprises. So we're talking about down payment assistance grants for home ownership, down payment assistance grants to buy land, and capital invested directly into the hands of new and emerging community developers to develop more housing. As we talked about last week when I was in with you, we know that many of our community members would like to see affordable housing, not just congregated in urban centers like Winooski or White River Junction, but actually spread out across our communities, and in many places partnered in conjunction with agricultural enterprises and agricultural opportunities. So we'll stop there, but please, if you have any questions about how those down payment assistance grants would work or who we're talking about with those, we really do want to talk with you all to hear, how this would be relevant for your constituents, and answer any questions you have. So thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you, Jean. And Ornella, nice to see you again remotely. We do have a question. Representative Boslin.
Yeah, this is, I guess it's a question and a comment, but a number of you mentioned, and actually Mark was the first one, an incident where Mark had a situation with the police here that made him feel unsafe, and all of you are not wanting to come in solidarity with him. And it sounds like it's kind of left dangling. And it seems to me if there was something really inappropriate that happened that is making people feel unsafe, something needs to happen. And so I guess I would just encourage you. I don't know. I mean, I think Mark mentioned speaking to leadership, but I don't know who that means. Does that mean leadership, the House Speaker? Does it mean the Sergeant at Arms? Does it mean the Chief of Police, who we actually have a new one since last year? But if you feel like it's unresolved and you're not getting answers, I really would encourage you to reach back and connect with some folks. We have an ethics panel that's supposed to look at incidents that are problematic either with any of us or with guests to the State House. And it really sounds like the process hasn't happened so that you folks feel safe. So I just want to encourage you to follow up on that, because I would like to see you in the building, and I would like Mark to feel safe in the building, and I would like other people to feel safe in the building. And if there's an incident that multiple people from this group are aware of, it sounds like some work needs to happen. I used to work in restorative justice, and it sounds like the justice hasn't been restored yet. So please do follow up on that.
We have an intention to follow up, and there are already some things that we are thinking about. There's so much work that we're doing right now, all at the same time. And we wanted to make sure that as we moved in the direction of having conversations about this, that we had really thought through a lot of the different pieces and really got clear with our own feelings and really were able to engage in a nice, constructive, and building conversation, because we know at this point, with everything happening, everybody's really doing the very best that they can. And sometimes the very best that we can is not good enough. And then what do we do when that happens? So we have an intention to engage leadership and to have a good conversation about what happens so we can all learn, and then we can move forward and make sure that all of our community members feel safe going into the State House.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we should probably call it an afternoon or call it a week. And thank you again to our visitors on this topic. As somebody pointed out, there are other committees that do have jurisdiction over this issue in general, and we historically have not. That's not to say that it won't be the case going forward. So I think this has been really helpful for us to have this conversation. And again, I would encourage, whether or not we end up with legislation, I'd encourage anybody to reach out directly to any of the folks who've just spoken. With that, have a great weekend, and we will see you all soon. And we're all set. So, yeah.
Thank you,